Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Jen Scotney, who is a 36-year-old vegan ultra runner who works as a human rights lawyer. During this podcast, we're going to talk more about Jen's journey into running, the different races that she's done, from the Dig Deep Ultra to the Spine Challenge and the Northern Traverse. Jen's going to provide top tips and advice about training, recovery, and how she dealt with chronic fatigue. Jen, if you were to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit more about you, what would you say?
Well, I mean, it's only recently that I have actually been saying that I'm a runner. I think before that, I just thought it was just such a tiny hobby that it didn't seem worth talking about. So there's quite often my husband would catch me, somebody would say, "Oh, so do you run?" And I just go, "No, not really." But now I think I feel more confident in saying, yeah, I am an ultra runner. I've lost count of the ultra marathons that I've run, and it is a big part of my life.
Do you know what? That is absolutely fascinating, because that I think that's an issue that a lot of women have. So you've got out there and you are an ultra runner, and yet you still wouldn't necessarily call yourself a runner. But let's go back. Let's find out a little bit more about growing up. What was your childhood like? Were you spending a lot of time outdoors? Were you sort of running around?
Yeah, completely. I grew up not far from where I live now, maybe about 10 miles away in the Peak District. And I'm just really pleased. Yeah, our parents gave us a lot of freedom. So summer holidays would just be me. I had 2 older brothers and an older sister. We would just be, a house would back onto this hillside, and we would just be up there every day running around. We had games. We got the whole village involved in games of TIG, and just lots of memories of being outside, camping in the garden. It was quite Enid Blyton-esque, I'd say, looking back. I mean, at the time, you don't really question it. You think that everybody else is having a similar background. But even now, I just realise more and more each day how special my childhood was.
Oh, it just sounds so idyllic.
Yeah.
I mean, did you run at school as well? Were you part of like the school running teams, or cross country or athletics?
Yeah. Yes, I was. I'm quite tall. I was like 5'10" by the time I was about 13. So high jump was my main thing at school in terms of kind of representing the school and county for athletics. But to get the day off school, I wasn't allowed just to do the high jump competition, because that was like 10 minutes of a day, and I'd need the whole day off school. So I used to get put into, one year I did the shot put, which was kind of quite funny to watch this really skinny, gangly teenager try and throw this ball when I'd never really done it before. I think I did the 800 and a few other bits of running. But when I was growing up, football was my main kind of passion in terms of representing teams. I used to play at Sheffield Wednesday. So that, I would say, was my main focus. So I did play netball and hockey and rounders in all the school teams as well.
How did you manage to get past or get through almost those like awkward years, sort of 13, 14? Because, at the moment, like a lot of girls do end up dropping sports from school.
Yeah.
Or they leave school. I mean, why was sports such a central part of your life, do you think? Why do you think you sort of managed to get through that time period?
I think for me, it was having the older siblings and having, particularly my 2 brothers. I used to play football, so quite often I was the only girl there. But I got used to that, because going back to my primary school, it was a small village school, but I can't remember what day it was, when it was PE, the girls used to stay at the school and play catch ball, which is a very odd game that I've never heard of since. But we did progress to netball, and then the boys would be going down to the sports field to play football. And I questioned why I couldn't go and play football. And I was the first girl to be allowed to go with the boys and the first girl to play in the football team. So I was quite used to being the only girl playing. At that point, it wasn't so widespread that girls would be playing football. So I think that helped, that you didn't really feel out of place or question why you were there. But I did I remember, like, one of the things that I used to be incredibly embarrassed about is as soon as I start playing exercise or doing anything, then I go bright red and seem to stay red longer than everybody else. So at one point we managed to get one of the boys' PE teachers to let us play five-a-side football and have like little coaching in lunchtime. But I remember being really embarrassed because then I'd have to go back for my lunch and then the next lesson, and I'd still be really bright because obviously I'd run around and put everything into it. So yeah, there were times, I guess, when it was harder, but I think overall it was just such a part of my life from when I was young that I wasn't really questioning it.
Yeah, and you were such a pioneer as well, being the first girl to go and play football. Can I just
didn't really feel like that at the time. It's just like, well, you know, I play football every day at home. Why can't I do it now?
Absolutely. Jen, can I just ask how old you are?
I'm 36.
You're 36. Oh, same age as me. Love it. What was your progression after school? I mean, did you, I don't know if it was the same for you, but after I left school, went to university, I still played sports. I did lacrosse and rowing. But then after I left uni and started work, there was a massive drop off for me in terms of having the time and the availability to go and do exercise. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, well, it sounds pretty similar. I mean, I went to university and did 5 years at university. And during that time, I joined the football team, which sounds like obvious, but actually that was a really big thing for me because by that point I was really shy, and I think I probably played a whole season at Leeds University barely speaking to anybody because I was just so painfully shy. And you get to university and we had some kind of mature students that were doing PhDs and things, and it was just quite scary going into that group. Also, by that point, watching football was a big part of my life. So I had a season ticket at Manchester United at Old Trafford. So I had to kind of fit some games in around that. I didn't want to miss those matches. So, but I didn't join anything else. Like I do look back and think, oh, I wish I'd had the courage to carry on with athletics or something else at uni. But for me, it was just football. And I had a mountain bike. I mean, I guess I never saw mountain biking as a sport, but a massive part of my childhood were bike rides and going out. We'd be making jumps and doing pretty kind of daring stuff on our bikes. And that, when I was at uni, that was still my mode of transport. So I would think nothing of kind of cycling 8 miles to my football, do my whole football training, cycle back. That's just how it was. So yeah, that was my university. And even when I was doing my final years, in my postgraduate years at uni, I was still in the football team then. But like you, I qualified in 2005 as a barrister and then went down to London and I had my bike for a bit. It got stolen while I was in Brixton and never replaced, but it just wasn't practical to cycle around carrying massive, huge legal files. So it just became non-existent then, my sport. I think the only thing that I used to do is maybe on Christmas holidays I'd come back to my mum and dad in the Peak District and then do my my usual run there. So I'd say it went down to sort of runs twice a year.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about your job. So you're a human rights lawyer, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So at the moment I'm working, my specialisation is children in prison and care. So at the moment that's mostly who I represent, but also some adults in prison as well.
Oh wow, that must be so challenging and sort of mentally quite draining. Is running something that you use now to help sort of manage the mental side of the stress from the job?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, sometimes it does feel quite surreal in that I spent the day in a high security prison dealing with not very pleasant cases, and then within an hour you're back and running around on the hillside. So it's definitely, in that sense, quite a sense of freedom for me to get away from work.
So let's talk a little bit more about sort of the progression of your running journey. When did you first start either entering races, and then when did you start realising that you were actually pretty good at it?
Well, I still wouldn't say I'm very good at it. I think in the kind of along with my dropping off of sport when I started working. At that point, I was on some medication as well, which had causing me to put on weight just gradually, but it was noticeable, you know, and I'm talking like over a few years. I really struggled with that. So in my 20s, I became quite insecure. I had that shyness, which had improved, because when you're training to be a barrister, you kind of just kept getting shoved in front of classes or tutors or whatever it was, and you have to learn how to do public speaking. But I can do that when you're representing somebody else, but actually for myself and doing it on a personal level, I've still struggled quite a lot with shyness. So having that lack of body confidence as well, and it was just, looking back, it was quite a tricky time for me. And then in probably 2013, by this point I'd set myself up as kind of self-employed. I was working back in the Peak District, working from my house, and I had started walking then, so my holidays would be walking in the Lake District. But I got to the point where I was missing sport, so I joined a football team in Sheffield and played there for a season, which was really good fun. And that was kind of getting my fitness up. And around the same time, so yeah, 2013, I think it will have been, I joined Dark Peak Fell Runners, which had been a club. I'm not sure if my dad was actually a member, but I know lots of his friends were. And I was far too scared to do any runs or races. I did kind of pluck up the courage to get a vest. And then I think it might have been November that year, I did my first fell race, which are just the local races near us. It's kind of turn up on the day, pay a fiver, and they're usually between sort of 4 and 7 miles. I think this one might have been the Lathkill one, which is 7 miles. And I enjoyed it. And so, yeah, that's how I got back into it, through the fell races, really.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, joining a running club is, you know, it's obviously such a great thing to go and do. But, you know, like you've almost just said, you know, you were quite shy and, you know, maybe a little bit concerned about what it was like to actually go and join a running club, lots of sort of fears coming out. When did you start sort of extending the distances? Did you set running goals that you wanted to run a half marathon or do a marathon? How did it progress like that?
No, you see, I've never run a half marathon or a marathon. So I'd been doing the local fell runs, but aside from that, like the main joy that I got from it was just me going out. At that point I was running with my dog. I've stopped that now because I don't think he was really enjoying it, and it was causing an injury, me pulling him. So me and my dog would just go out on a weekend. It's just kind of going back to your childhood. You're there, you're skipping over rocks. It doesn't matter if you're out for an hour or 4 hours or however long, you know. It's just, even now, that's the thing that I like, just that sense of adventure of going off. I'm not really sure my route, but I'll find it and have fun. And so I trying to think, like, well, because I don't remember doing really long runs, but at that point I wasn't using Strava or anything like that, so not even sure how far I had run. And I entered an ultra, and that was it, really. So I don't think I did anything in between. I just entered a 30-mile ultra thinking it would be fun.
I was going to say, I mean, that's I love it, absolutely amazing. But entering a 30-mile ultra, what was the decision, or why did you make that decision? Was there somebody in the background encouraging you, supporting you? Is it something that you just wanted to either personally challenge yourself for? What was the reason why?
I think by that point I was using social media, mostly Twitter, and although that's kind of, I mean, I'm quite prolific on there now, but at the time, again, this was really out of character for me because I was so shy. Just the thought of putting yourself out there to strangers was just terrifying. So I went on Twitter. At the time, I didn't really tell anybody. I definitely wasn't following any friends or anything, but I was following a lot of guys. Particularly, I then found the women later, but guys that were doing long distance walking. So there was a challenge, it's still going on, the TGO one, which is you just plan your route and walk across Scotland. And to me, that was just amazing. I was like, wow. And so I started following these people on Twitter, and that's how I think I found the ultra runners. And obviously now I'm married to one of them, Marcus Scotney. So at the time, yeah, when I'd entered the ultra, I think we were probably together, but we were friends before that anyway. So around that time, so I did have him, and I think just seeing this day in, day out of what other people are doing, it normalizes it. So it was just, I didn't really question whether I could do it or not. I just assumed I could.
Oh, I love that. And did you meet Marcus at a race?
No, we met over Twitter years ago.
Ooh, tell me more. Who tweeted who?
I think, well, again, I was following just a lot of these people. It just kind of opened up a whole new world to me, where I was feeling quite insular at the time. I'd gone through like a breakup, which also I didn't know if I could carry on with my house, lose my house, and I thought about changing my career at the time. My brother and my dad had died quite suddenly and recently. So it was kind of quite a time of turmoil for me. And I was just, I wasn't in a good place. And so seeing this open up these other worlds on Twitter was really exciting. And then so Marcus was somebody that I was following just because he was such a good runner at the time. And I think he then started messaging me, and it was like every day asking how my run was. And eventually I gave in.
Oh, I love that. I'm so sorry to hear about your brother and your dad. That must have, and also like your job and your house and your relationship. Was that all sort of around a similar time period?
Yeah, that was all within a kind of about 18 months. I mean, the career was my choice. I just found that I was just burnt out with the job. And so that was my decision to quit, which in the end I did look at other stuff and got as far as doing a year science course, because I was going to just completely change career. But then I went back to law, which I'm quite happy with that decision. I think it was probably other things that were going on that were making me unhappy rather than the job. So that was that would be sort of 2010. Just for those few years after that was looking back, I don't know how I got through it all, but yeah.
Were you running during that period?
That's when I started running. So I think I'd been walking, and then 2010 is when I moved back to the Peak District just before my dad died. And it had been my intention that I would then have this lifestyle where I would be getting up, going out for walks in the countryside, going to my desk and having evenings off. And it just didn't happen like that. I was still just stuck at my desk, 14, 15 or more hours a day. So I decided to get a dog because that would force me out, which is my beagle Sherlock, who has more Instagram followers than me. And so, I got a dog and started walking, and that just became such a special time for me, just those being back out in the countryside every day, watching the seasons change, watching the landscape change. It really had quite a profound effect. And then gradually I just started running the flat bits, and I wasn't even in running shoes at the time. It was just pushing myself a little bit, and then I just gradually ran more and more on those dog walks. And at the same, so then that was just me getting fitter. I wasn't drinking hardly at all anymore, which I think that had been kind of crept up when you're living in London or living in cities, and it's quite easy to get sucked into that way of relaxing with having a glass of wine every night. So it just became quite a turning point for me, having a healthier lifestyle. I lost the weight. I just started feeling good about myself. So it definitely, that was an important part of it.
And then this 30-mile ultra. Tell us a little bit more about it.
That was the Dig Deep Ultra, which starts just a few miles from my house. And so, I can't remember when I did that. So that would have been 2014, I guess, in summer. I can't remember what month it was, maybe the June. Yeah, and Marcus had moved in by that point, and he did it. And it just felt like going out into the unknown, really. I had recorded parts of it, and I think I had done I'm trying to think if I'd done maybe about, I guess I'd probably done about 16 miles. It was the longest run I'd done before then, I don't know. So I think, kind of looking back, like when I was doing these fell races and my first few ultras, at the time, there's no pressure, there's nothing. It's just that sense of fun, go out. I don't know if I probably was wearing a watch and recorded it, but I couldn't tell you anything about pace or, I just wasn't stressing about that. It really was just running. And I don't think I did too badly in that one. I mean, I didn't do badly in terms of the pace, and like the time, but even in the placings. So, whereas now, I think I would just put so much pressure on myself. I couldn't run like that again. It was fun. It was a hot day. I think I drank too much because I was panicking about getting dehydrated. So I drank loads in the first few miles, and then halfway through you have to climb up Win Hill at Parkins Clough, which is a really steep, notorious ascent of Win Hill. So I remember at one point my legs went to jelly and I felt sick, but then you just get over it. I was like, on the way down, I was like, oh, that's fine. I probably just drank too much.
So were you and Marcus sort of running it together at the same pace, or were you both running your own separate race?
Yeah, no, he's always just in a different league to me, so I would never try. The only race that we've done together is when we did the OM in October, which was fun.
So was there any like challenging moments during that race where it was suddenly like, oh, I'm not going to finish it, or was it just not like that at all?
Well, I mean, I did have that wobble up going that I just mentioned when I just started feeling sick but then, which I think was probably only maybe it was less than halfway, but no. And that's why I look back quite fondly on those races where just no pressure. I mean, now I have done a fell race, like my local fell race, and I get so nervous before I start panicking. I get anxiety, which I just didn't used to have. So no, I think if anything, I used to race a bit better back then.
So how do you manage your anxiety now before races?
Well, I think part of it is that I'm actually picking long, slow races that don't make me so anxious. If I kind of don't do the shorter, fast ones now, because I've got into my head that are just too stressful and I'm not fast enough. But I think for me, it's just, it does get easier once the race starts. So it's just kind of getting through those moments before you start.
And what are you thinking about while you run?
You mean in races or just in general?
Yeah, well, I suppose in both really. Like, is there any sort of difference? Either is one just sort of like mulling over problems? There's another one. Are you thinking like race strategy, goals, your pace, your hydration?
I was trying not to think about that. I think is what makes it more enjoyable. I think I started off running, I was doing these far races, and then I was doing kind of 30-40 mile ultras quite regularly, really, compared to how little I race now. But I think I then started putting pressure on myself because I think it's kind of, in one way, I like Strava for me in terms of recording my runs and what I've done. But in other ways, having that comparison to other people, it started putting a lot of stress and pressure on me and taking the enjoyment out. And that's when I started using music, actually, because I found that music just helped me switch off. Because if I start thinking about, or stressing, really thinking negative thoughts, then I can just zone into the music. And there was a time like last December when I was training for the Spine Challenger, and the runs were getting hard. Like, I just felt like I was getting slower. And it was the first time I trained for something, whereas now I realise that you're going to have patches like that, or it's all just part of the kind of being tired when you're training, and it'll be fine because you have your recovery weeks and you get better. But at the time I was sort of almost thinking, why am I even doing this? I'm getting slower and slower. And I was out on a run in the dark, which was quite normal. But I suddenly stopped and looked behind me, and I had this gorgeous full moon, and then you just notice all these things around you, the sparkling rocks. And it was like, even though it's pitch black, it is still beautiful out here. And you just need to stop stressing about pace. I think I was mostly stressing about work, really, because a lot of nearly every run I have to come back and work afterwards. So I was like, look, when you're on your yoga mat, which is another part of my life, which is in the last few years has become really important, which is my yoga. It's like, when you're on your yoga mat, you're not stressing about these things. You're just getting in the moment. And it was trying to work out, like, or bring that to my running so that I wasn't stressing that, this is quite a sacred moment of just you being out, you're doing something for you, you're improving yourself, and you need to just respect that. And so I wouldn't say that, that I stress too much on races and runs now, but as I say, I do pick my races maybe.
Let's talk about some of those races that you've done. I know you've done the Northern Traverse. You mentioned the Spine Challenger. Could you just tell us about one of a particular race maybe that stands out in your mind, whether it's the toughest or the biggest challenge that you had to do?
I think the Spine Challenger was probably it was the first time that I had trained for a race, because before then it really was just skipping around with my dog. Like, there was no structure. Some weeks I'd be full of energy and I'd probably do like 40, 50 miles, but some weeks I'd just cancel runs because work was too much and I'd hardly run at all. I mean, I used to do the sort of a 3 or a 5 mile loop from my house, which I do pretty much every day. But I wasn't always doing long runs at weekends and things. So I was about August last year when I knew I had a place on the Spine Challenger. I'd actually was supposed to have a place the year before, but then I tore my meniscus, which is why I stopped running with my dog. So I didn't do the race. But I'm almost quite glad, because I hadn't trained. I'd just carried on doing my kind of popping up and doing a long 30-mile run and then not doing anything for a few weeks. So it was, last August, I started getting some structure to my training. When Marcus is a coach, so he doesn't give me my runs each day, but a general, this is what your week is, this is going to be a tough week, this is going to be a recovery week. So I had that, and I just found that I had quite a lot of dedication that I didn't really know that I had to put into my running. And Montaigne had asked me to do some vlogs for them, so again, that was completely out of my comfort zone. I took my camera out on my first few runs and recces of the Pennine Way and didn't actually dare speak to the camera, so it's just a few shots of me running, which was all I could do. But by the end of it, I was like chatting, couldn't really shut me up. Marcus was trying to edit those down, so that was fun. But I suppose it was that sense that, well, I've got Montaigne, I've got Marcus, I've got other people actually investing their time into me doing this race, so maybe I should take it more seriously and see what happens. So that was quite a turning point for me. And I suppose it also put me out there, because before quite often I wouldn't tell anybody that I was doing a race. There was a 12-hour one I didn't even tell Marcus I was doing. I just went off on my own and did that. So it was a change to actually talk about this race and what I was doing. I think there was still a sense of maybe it was easy to talk about my training, but it was less easy to talk about why I was doing it, talk about my insecurities or vulnerabilities. So that's something that perhaps I did a little bit more of in the Northern Traverse.
Tell everybody what the Spine race actually is. What's it made up of? Yeah.
It's it was billed as 108, but the guy that I finished with, they got 113 miles with the diversions, and it's the first 108 miles of the Pennine Way. And it's in January, so you're at the mercy of whatever weather's thrown at you. We were quite lucky with the weather for the first 24 hours, but by the end of it, it was sub-zero temperatures, there was winds, and then it started raining for me and hail just on the last few miles. But it was a really fun race.
So it's a non-stop 108-mile race along the Pennine Way. Tactically, tell us a little bit more about the race. Either when do you start? What do you carry on your back? Do you stop and sleep? Do you take a sleeping bag? How do you refuel? Just talk us through a bit more of the technical aspects.
Well, there's only one checkpoint which has a drop bag, and that's like 50 miles in. And there is a long kit list, and the kit list includes, I had to carry a sleeping bag, a sleeping mat, a stove, pans, gas, knife, obviously warm clothes and things. So you've got quite a big pack on your back, and then you've only got that one chance of hot food and a drop bag and things. So you're carrying quite a lot of your food as well. And so we set off in the morning, I think it was about 8 o'clock. So you've got that first bit in daylight, But I think that's the other struggle, is so much of that race was in the dark, and I'm fine running in the dark. I'm used to it, but it was just it did get quite tedious doing it for a whole full night, especially when you know that you're going through some gorgeous moorland and countryside and you can't see anything.
So when it is dark and it's cold, and I know there can be some very technical sections along that route, how did you cope with that? How did you get through those really challenging sections?
I wouldn't really say that I had any low moments. I suppose I'm lucky in that I lived fairly near, I lived very near the start of the Pennine Way, and the other sections I had wrecked, and so in that sense there wasn't really anything that difficult for me. When I'd done all the records, we had that awful weather for months, and I'd been wearing neoprene socks just to keep my feet warm when I was going from bog to bog, and they'd worked really well in training. So I decided to start the race with those on, but what I hadn't realised is how much it had dried up in the few weeks that I'd been tapering and not out on the route. So it was so dry, particularly up at Bleaklow, which is one of the areas where it's really boggy. And so I felt fine going into the checkpoint, and then when I left the checkpoint after that over the moors, I was suddenly coming down from Top Withens, and I suddenly felt like I had a lot of blisters popping on the front of my feet. And I was like, okay, maybe that's just my mind playing tricks with me. But no, the more that I went on, my feet were in absolute agony, because the dry weather, but wearing these extra layer of socks had just caused a lot of blisters. So that was a bit low in that. Then it just slowed me down. Part of the kit list was to carry some spare socks. And looking back, I should have carried some running socks, but I was trying to cut down on my weight for the kit, so I had some kind of little silk thin socks that weren't much good at all, so that was my fault. But I took the neoprene socks off and then just did what I could, really. But it was frustrating that slowed me down, because otherwise I was feeling good. And I think going into that race, it was just a complete unknown. I hadn't planned to sleep, I didn't want to sleep, but I'd never run through the night before. The longest I'd done was the 12-hour race. So it was really fun going into that, not knowing how it's going to be. And also I found out that I am actually quite okay with going through a night. I wasn't tired at all at any point. And it was just coming into Hawes at the end that I had a few hallucinations. But otherwise, I wouldn't have known that I hadn't had that night's sleep. I think anybody looking at me might have known, but I couldn't remember. Was there many other women doing the race with you? Is it quite a popular event, or is it quite popular,
exclusive?
But not for women? And I think that's one of the things in both the races that I've done this year. It's such a small percentage of women doing it. Like, we're talking 10% or less that are women. So there's quite a sense of camaraderie between the women, because it's such a small group. But I'm hoping that would change as people see that it is really, there shouldn't be those barriers for women doing these races. It's, and the women are doing good in these races. We're all coming quite high up. So yeah, but again, that isn't something that I would look at and it would even cross register. I think maybe just because I'm so used to from my childhood of being the woman among the blokes. So but hopefully that will change.
So you're a vegan as well, so I'd love to know a little bit more about how you fuel for these races, and what your diet's like at home, because I think that'd be really interesting, because obviously sometimes there are so many people who say comments you can't be an ultra runner if you're a vegan, or how where do you get your protein from, and and your nutrition. So I'd just love to know a little bit more about your diet.
Yeah, I've been vegan for maybe 2.5 years now, and that didn't come about because of any kind of running or health reasons. That was just for the animal welfare aspect. And I had actually put it off for a bit because I suffered from anemia, and then actually I had fatigue as well, but that was before I was vegan. So it was only after that, when I was seeing a Chinese doctor, that she suggested cutting down on dairy, and that gave me the final push, really, because I thought that it wasn't a particularly healthy diet before I was vegan, for all those reasons that you said. But now I realise that we can just get everything we need from plants, and there's no reason to harm animals for our diet. So while I'm running, I will eat Trek bars and Cliff bars mostly. So they're kind of more flapjack type protein bars. But there are quite a lot of other vegan options. I don't like raisins, which cuts out quite a lot of the bars that people seem to use for running. And when I was on doing the Spine Challenger, I had like just tomato and pasta as my meal at the checkpoint. And I suppose the other dimension for the Spine Challenger is because the temperature's so low, it's trying to find food that doesn't freeze. So I had pain au chocolat, the vegan ones, and croissants, I think, that I took out on my bag, and they were really good in the second half of that race. And banana loaf got me through Northern Traverse because I suddenly, it's fine, you can use these bars, you're eating them for 30-mile runs, and that's okay. But actually, Northern Traverse took me over 3 days, so just eating the same flapjack I just started feeling sick at the thought of it. So I was glad that I had some other food with me then.
What do you eat for recovery, or what do you drink for recovery? Do you have like protein shakes?
I did start using one for because of my high volume of training that I was doing for the Spine Challenger. I think I just felt like everybody else was doing it. Maybe there was something in it, but I didn't really feel any different. I do make my own smoothies. Marcus has them after every run. I'm not that good at doing those. So that will be with sort of plant milk and nuts and bananas and maca powder and seeds in. But I do have soya milk after my runs as well. That seems to be a kind of good way of refueling. And I can notice if I don't eat straight after a run or leave it, or if it's been last year, if I used to have like a beer afterwards instead of any proper food or something, I do notice it. So I am trying to take that more seriously. And yeah, I think I would say the problem with ultra running is that it does give you the license really to eat what you want, which sounds good, but I do question about how healthy it can be sometimes, particularly for me. I just feel like it gives you the license to binge if you want to, and that's not particularly healthy for your body. So I am trying now to be a little bit more balanced. I mean, obviously people look at you and think, oh, you're vegan, you must have a really healthy diet, and on the whole I do. But at the same time, when you can just eat what you want after a run, you end up like me and Marcus we eat donuts, we eat all the things you're not supposed to eat, and you can eat them get away with eating them in quite a high quantity. So that's definitely something this year that I've tried to be a bit more aware of, really a bit more mindful about what I'm putting in my body. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Oh, I can completely relate. I mean, after I did the Appalachian Trail, and towards the end, I was doing like 30 odd miles every single day. And what I was eating was it was just disgusting. My diet was horrendous, but I just couldn't consume enough calories, to make up how many I was burning. I thought it was really interesting. You talked about, you briefly mentioned that you're anemic, and you've also suffered with fatigue. And I think that's quite interesting, because a lot of like women especially do suffer from anemia, or feel tired and don't necessarily know it's because they've got low iron, or the running is damaging their hemoglobin. I hope I'm getting that right, from the foot slamming on the floor. Do you take supplements for that, or do you manage it in a natural way? Do you take iron water? How do you manage your anemia?
I take iron tablets, but what happened with me is actually something that I put on my Instagram just this last week, because I went to get my form signed for my next race in the Alps with my doctor, and that was the last time I saw the doctor was because of this fatigue 3 years ago. So for me, what happened is in January one year, I had donated blood, which I've kind of done since I've been eligible to. So I donated blood, and then the next weekend I felt lightheaded going up a hill when I was running, and and then there were just a few, it kind of carried on a bit for a few days. So I went to the doctor and got the kind of, well, you don't look anemic, but I was severely anemic. And looking back at the last blood donation, I hadn't actually been able to give blood. That was in the August. They hadn't taken any blood because of my iron levels. So, but I hadn't really registered that there was a problem. I just thought, I perhaps haven't eaten properly today or something. So that had been going on. And then I took the iron tablets then that the doctor prescribed and felt better. In fact, I did an ultra that month. I think I did the Haworth Hobble not long after. And then, as the doctor suggested, just come off the iron tablet. So I came off and I just had really bad fatigue again. So I went back to the doctor and they were like, oh, your iron stores probably haven't built up, so take them for longer this time. And I started taking the iron tablets again, but there wasn't an improvement. My fatigue was just getting worse and worse and worse. And that year, I mean, it got to the point where, I wasn't running, but that didn't seem such an issue at the time because my main concern was me working. I'm self-employed. Could I work? Could I keep the house? Because I was just struggling. I couldn't, some days just getting out of bed was too much of an effort, or I couldn't walk up the stairs. A productive day could be getting 3 letters out. By 4 o'clock, when normally I'd be walking the dog, doing another run, or I was just lying on the sofa. And no matter how much sleep you get, you're just still tired. So I had a few tests with the doctor, but I remember seeing this doctor in the August, and that's when he just told me, no, you've got chronic fatigue. It's gone on for so long, which basically means they don't know what the cause of the fatigue is. It's impacted your life for 6 months, I think it is. So that's what we'll label you as. And he was just, that's it. There's nothing else they could do. And I was in tears seeing the doctor, and just went outside and just sat in my car crying because I was just so scared. It was just felt like I was getting worse and worse. It was just, I couldn't really see a way out. And if I hadn't have had the support of like Marcus and my mum, and I just don't know what I'd have done after that thing. So then it was actually somebody from my running club lent me a book about a guy with ME. And in that book, the kind of theme at the start was, well, how much do you want to get better? Somebody said to him, and obviously he'd give anything to get better. It's like, well, okay, do whatever you can then, rather than sitting around feeling really sorry for yourself. So he started with acupuncture and then went through a lot of other kind of therapies. But so I thought, right, okay, I'll do the same. And I saw a Chinese doctor and got some acupuncture, and just, that was probably by about September that year, and I just felt immediately better. The fog just lifted. And so regularly saw her, got some Chinese herbs and things, and that for me is what improved it. I did have a period after I'd stopped where it came back again, not as bad, and I kind of knew what it was. So then I just started having acupuncture every month to just keep on top of it. So I've stopped that now, but it's definitely still in my mind. And I think, I'll never know the reasons for that fatigue. Like blood donation has been a trigger for some people, so I'm not allowed to donate blood anymore. There were other things as well. I mean, like particularly we talked about that, just that a few years of just intense stress upon me. The fact that I didn't really take any time off work during that period, and just my work-life balance, how it's been for years actually, is just really bad. I'd taken antibiotics for the first time in my life just a few months before. So there's a few things that all have been in other cases identified as triggers. But for me, kind of what now I do take iron tablets, and I do take a vitamin, like just one designed for vegans. Just, I don't see any harm in that. And I am trying, but it's work in progress, to reduce my work hours, reduce my stress, and keep more balance with that. So yoga's been really helpful, and my meditation. And yeah, I'd say that's how I try and keep balance, but it's definitely not always good. Yeah. Still work to be done.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, that is really fascinating. I mean, I it's really interesting hearing you talk, because it's like when you're talking, I'm like, yeah, I remember being in that situation, feeling burnt out, feeling tired, not being able to get out of bed, so many similar symptoms. And for me, it was working with a naturopath and changing my diet, getting reflexology done on my feet, doing meditation. God, what other thing? Oh, I had I still got my Himalayan salt lamp.
Oh, I have my Himalayan salt sole. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, my friend got me into this because it was kind of quite a popular thing. And then I think she does still have it, but I think, she lasted a week with it, and I'm still a year later having my salty water every day.
But I think what's amazing is it's finding out what works for you. And I think that's the real key. The key thing is, not everything's going to work, but there will be bits and bobs that you can pick and choose from. I'd love to talk more about the Northern Traverse. So I think this is, one of the most recent races that you've done. Can you tell us a little bit more about the race, where it is, what's involved, and why you wanted to do it?
I'd actually entered Northern Traverse when I started training for the Spine Challenger. So I guess at that point, I'd entered this race, which is 190 miles across the country. At the time, the longest I'd run was 55 miles. But yeah, so that follows the Wainwright's coast-to-coast path from St. Bees. You go through the Lake District and then across through the Yorkshire Dales, over the North York Moors, and end up at Robin Hood's Bay. So it's stunning, the route. And it's a bit similar to the Spine Challenger in that there's very few checkpoints. They're kind of 35, 40 miles apart. You've got 4, and you can have a drop bag at each one. And there's no other outside support. That's the same for the Spine Challenger. So you're not allowed people to come and meet you or run with you or pass you things. You really are out there on your own. And it's only run every 2 years. I'd seen about it a few years ago, so probably the year before they started the first one. And because I've walked the coast to coast, the thought of running it just seemed amazing. I was kind of, I want to do that. And I don't think Marcus would ever say to me, you've got no chance. But he'd be he says, oh, it's non-stop, or you'd have to run 50 miles a day, or this sort of thing. So he's kind of not encouraging me in that sense. But so I didn't do it 2 years ago when they had it, but I followed it. And then I entered it. I was kind of just been that sort of nagging thing of, I really want to run that. And I remember I'd entered it and I didn't tell Marcus that I'd entered it. There's a phrase that some of my friends use, which is doing a gen, which is basically entering a race and then wondering how you tell your other half or your family that you're doing it. So yeah, I entered it and then just kind of kept it quiet, really. I think eventually I fessed up to Marcus that I had got
really, I've got a surprise.
I thought I probably need to tell him, more than the week before this time. And so I walked the coast to coast. How I remember it is my dad died, and that day, not long after he'd left the house, my mum sat down and said, I want to walk the coast to coast. So I said, I'll do it with you, because my mum and dad had walked the Pennine Way in 1974 before we were all born. And then after they'd done the Pennine Way, they bought the Coast to Coast book, but then started having kids and never got round to doing it. So we did it the next year. And by that point, just a few months after my dad died, my brother died as well. So me and my mum set off. It was the usual chaos of, I had way too much work and was working up until the last minute and was posting stuff as, on the route up and things. But it was a fun walk. We had really good weather. There was sort of some boringy bits, but in my head, I was like, well, that 20-mile section that took us a whole day, I can just get that done in a few hours and get to the North York Moors and things. So, yeah, I was kind of looking forward to it. And I think the Spine Challenger was really good training in that I knew I could get through a night, and it gave me a bit more, well, actually you do need to change your socks or take a bit more kit, be a bit more practical. So but then after the Spine Challenger, I had another race lined up, which was the High Peak Marathon. So I started training for that, kind of wrecking that, and then that got called off from the snow. And after that, I only had a few months preparation really for Northern Traverse, and it's not on my doorstep, so it's kind of maybe about 3 hours to get to any of the places or more on it. So I hadn't planned on wrecking it, but I decided that actually that is just something less to stress about. I can just visualize myself on it, and I thought it would give me a better chance at moving quickly on it. So I did go and recce the whole route in 3 sections, which was really good fun as well, because I booked myself in at youth hostels. So I did one in with my mate Martin in the lakes, and then I did the last section. Me and Marcus stayed up in a little cottage for a weekend, long weekend, and then the middle section I did as a bit of an adventure on my own, where I had my car in Richmond and then got dropped off in Shap and just had 3 days running to get back to my car, which I quite like, staying in youth hostels. So that was good that I had wrecked it all. And I wasn't that nervous about the race. I think, again, because I knew it was just so long and slow, there was no point getting all worked up at the start. Just sit back and enjoy it, which is what I did.
What's your advice and tips for other women and men who might be interested in doing a race like that? I mean, for me, firstly, get yourself on the start line not injured, because I see some quite bizarre types of training for these things. So I'm lucky that I've got Marcus, who's a coach, to help me with that. But it really, don't overdo the training, do it to your level so that you can actually start this race. I think a big one for me was kind of thinking a bit more about my drop bags and what you need over this race. So just because in that race, the actual kit that you had to carry was fairly short list. So it was sort of a bit of extra clothes and a compass, and I don't remember there being much on it. It certainly wasn't like sleeping bags and things like that. But actually, because I do spend a lot of time on my own doing these runs, I sort of know what I need to carry. And I had extra layers to what was on the kit list, because I know that I can get quite cold at some times, and food as well, just having that variety, so that if you're sick of banana Trek bars after a day, which I was, then you've got other options. So thinking about what you need for that. And I think the other thing is that your feet, they're probably, I don't think anybody survived without blisters and all sorts on their feet. So be prepared for that. I had tape to patch them up, and just kind of at some point it was just cover it in tape and try not to worry about that. Just get on, because if you stop and think about what your feet are looking like at this point in the race, then you're not going to carry on. What are your top 3 items in your drop bag?
Well, definitely the tape. So this was a kind of just your normal tape for your feet there, and that really helped me get through Northern Traverse. I could have done with that on the Spine Challenger. A treat, I think, something to look forward to in terms of food. So sometimes that was, a banana loaf. That was amazing on that one. So it could just be a little bag of Skittles or party rings. People laugh at me because that's my little treat. So it was almost like a little reward for getting there. For that one, it's a summer race, but it was so cold at night that I was wearing, I think when I left on the last night, the checkpoint, I'm probably had 5 or 6 layers on. So make sure you've just got enough kit so that you have got those choices that you can make.
And how do you celebrate once you've finished a race?
Well, that one, I think I'd probably planned the best in that I'd managed to get on top of my work a bit more before the race. Whereas the Spine Challenger, I was back at work the next day, which wasn't pleasant. And so, that one, at least it just felt so nice to know that I wasn't working the next day. And Marcus came to pick me up. I think I probably had my little chocolate or strawberry milkshake. And it really was just such a treat to sit on the sofa, because I never get a chance to do that normally. So that was my treat. That was how I celebrated, was a few days off work.
Oh, love it. And Jen, have you got any other future races planned, or any future races on the bucket list?
The next race is UT4M, which is in the Alps in August in France. And this one I kind of was really blasé about because it kind of seemed, well, it's the shortest because it's only 100 miles this year. So I kind of just thought, oh, yeah, no, that'd be fun. It'd be great to go away to the Alps. We normally can't afford to kind of go and have those sort of holidays. So Marcus is doing it too. But then since agreeing to it and getting my place, then I've actually looked into it, and it's so much ascent that I'm getting a bit worried about it. It's just hard to train for that. It's like 11,000 meters of ascent. So that's going to be tough. And then next year, yeah, I do have some plans, but I'm going to make my final decision at the end of the year, depending how training's going. So I'm not going to talk about those.
No, absolutely. Totally understand. So Jen, if people want to follow along more about your races, where's the best place to find you on social media?
Twitter is just Jen Scotney, and so is my Instagram, and they're the places where I bore everybody with photos of my runs and what's happening.
Oh, fantastic. Well, what I'll do is I'll make sure I put the links to your Instagram and your Twitter account at Jen Scotney, Scotney. But Jen, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your running journey that you've been on and give us your top tips and advice. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you very much.
Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jen and it's inspired you to put your trainers on to go out for a run or to start increasing your distances. Now, I have actually interviewed so many female runners on the Tough Girl podcast, from Tanith Facey going from the couch running the London Marathon, Julie Creffield, who was behind Too Fat to Run. We've spoken with Nikki Kimball, who talks very openly and honestly about her battle with depression. We've talked with Anna McNuff, who ran the full length of New Zealand, and Transon, who's an American ultra runner who has broken 20 world records and won Western States a record 14 times. We've spoken with Larry Morgan, an ultra endurance marathon runner, Jill Hormer, who's another ultra endurance runner, Selena McCall, a 43-year-old married mother of two who ran the Marathon des Sables in 2016, Amy Hughes, who talks about running 521 miles on a treadmill in a week. We've spoken with Lorna North from Queen of the Mile. We've spoken with her mother, Alison North, who started running in her 60s and went from running an 8K to doing a 100-kilometer race. Elise Downing, the youngest and only female to run 5,000 miles around the coast of Great Britain. We've spoken to another ultra runner and human rights lawyer, Stephanie Case, who's the founder of Free to Run, Jen Brown, who's a running coach behind Sparta Chicks, Mina Holder, who's run the full length of New Zealand. The list goes on and on and on. There is a tremendous amount of content, which you can go and check out at toughgirlchallenges.com. You can find details about all of our past guests and our future guests that we have coming up. New episodes come out every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time, but go and check out toughgirlchallenges.com for more information. I'm currently on a big cycling challenge at the moment. I am out cycling down the Pacific Coast Highway, so please do come and follow me, find out more about my journey. I started in September the 10th. And I plan to finish down in Mexico in December before heading off to Melbourne to spend some time with my brother and his family. But thank you so much for everybody who's been listening. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting the Tough Girl podcast and helping me with the mission to increase the amount of female role models out in the media and my mission to motivate and inspire you. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, think about giving back, think about supporting, think about becoming a patron. Take that step, take that action. Donate between $5 and $25 a month. It makes a massive difference to help me fund the running costs and also allows me to earn an income to be able to fund a lifestyle through toughgirlchallenges.com. So please do go check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Please do go check out the vlogs as well on my YouTube channel. And thank you so much for listening. I'll be back with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl Podcast. All right, take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.